Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Wonderful to see. I don't see many faces, but it's wonderful to have you on joining us on this new moon call. The intent of the Well of Lights monthly new moon calls is to bring together an open and inclusive global community of the heart. Each month, we invite different wisdom keepers and evolutionary teachers to participate with us. We hope you will continue to join us each month and spread the word with your friends and family. And we hope that you are enjoying this new format of being on the Zoom. It's a little bit of an adjustment, and it feels like we're just that much closer to the community, and it's a bit more like being in person. So we're really excited about it. All of our new moon calls are recorded, and we have archives at patreon.com/well of light. And today we have the pleasure of discussing how cultivating gratitude, reframing difficult experiences positively, and generosity can create more lasting happiness and joy. And we're so excited to welcome back our friend Roger Walsh, who graduated from Australia's Queensland University with degrees in psychology, physiology, neuroscience, and medicine, and then came to the United States as a Fulbright scholar. He's now at the University of California at Irvine, where he is a professor of psychiatry, philosophy, and anthropology, as well as a professor in the religious studies program. Welcome, Roger. And I'll just mention your website is drrogerwalsh.com. And Michael Stone is a multifaceted leader in the realm of shamanism and spiritual development. He's on the faculty of the Shift Network and is the host and producer of the Shamanism Global Summit. For the past 15 years, he has hosted KVMR's weekly award-winning show Conversations, which highlights leading-edge thinkers, authors, and activists in environmental restoration, social justice, and spiritual fulfillment. And we're excited to be having some benefits of our weekly Global Changemakers call. We have had some help in figuring out how to get the interviews out on things like YouTube and iTunes and Spotify. So it's an exciting development, and hopefully you'll be able to enjoy more of the archives of radio shows. And as co-founder of Quantum Consulting, he works with organizations to combine quantum theory with mystical shamanism to promote healing, wellness, and belief change with his clients. Michael leads classes, teleseminars, and workshops on embodied shamanism, meditation, and unity spirituality. And the websites are welloflight.com, and as I mentioned before, patreon.com/welloflight.
Thank you, Marielle. Wonderful. Thank you, Roger, for being here. It's so good that we get to do this again.
Thank you very much. I always enjoy our conversations.
Roger, excited about this call. Would you like to just start out by maybe setting an intention for the call yourself?
I'd love to. Thank you very much. Let's see, I can see some people there. So for all of us, I think my aspiration, desire, prayer, which I'd love to have us join in, would be that our conversation among all of us serve the greater good, the welfare and the awakening of all, and that we have a good time in the process.
I love that. Beautiful. Yeah. So we have a relatively small group here this morning. I'm not sure if it's the technology that's intimidating with the new technology, or that it's just a Monday morning, but I really want to invite you to, if it feels right, you know, maybe your hair is a mess or you're in your bathrobe, but just to jump on anyway, so we can relate to you. I've been, like I said, I've been doing this 2 hours of meditation, and to have 50 people on the screen all together meditating, even though we're not looking at each other, it creates a field that's more powerful than, I think, just the auditory field that we create. And you don't have to do that, but you're just invited to participate at that level. We all want to be seen and heard, and at the same time, I think many of us are afraid to be seen and heard. So it's a good dilemma to have. And I think that's, one of the areas that actually relates to happiness and joy is that fear of being seen or making a mistake when we express ourselves. And, there are a number of things that Roger had written in the message we sent out about 3 different areas. And I thought it would be good, Roger, just to start talking about that, maybe with gratitude or whichever one you'd like to start with.
Why don't you lead where you think would be most valuable for everyone?
Well, as you know, gratitude is a big thing in our work, and it's really, I think it's especially an important thing in times of complexity and rapid change, which we're certainly in right now. And there's something about gratitude, and I'm just going to say my part and open it up for you, but something that Brother David Stendelrast, who has been on our show and one of my, Lynn Twist calls him the world's greatest authority on gratitude. And one of the things that I remember him saying that always impacted me is you have to be present to be grateful. And I think presence is the doorway that we have to create a field of gratitude wherever we are, by being present and then stepping into the gratitude, because that's really, I think, at the heart of gratitude. Your thoughts about that, Roger?
Yeah, well, it seems like presence is a foundation for so many qualities and capacities, and for the development of so many gifts. And anyway, who would argue with Brother David, who is one of the most remarkable human beings I've met. I think he's something like 93 and still running around the world and teaching, and actually, I can't resist telling a story. Last year, I was at the European Integral Conference in Hungary, and there were over 600 people from 39 countries, and Brother David was, of course, one of the keynote speakers. And one night, they took us out for a goulash party in the middle of these fields and had a gypsy band, and we were dancing under the moonlight, and Brother David was there with his young 40-year-old attendant who was looking after him, and Brother David was there dancing away with us all. And late in the night, his 40-year-old attendant said to 92-year-old Brother David, "Brother David, I'm getting tired." Brother David was still going strong. So whatever Brother David does, and I know he does a lot of gratitude, it works wonders.
Definitely speaks to gratitude, hey?
Yeah. And he has made such an amazing contribution in bringing gratitude to the fore as a psychological and spiritual practice. It really, in some ways, it sounds common sense gratitude, but he has made us and our culture aware of the fact that this is a real practice. As with so many qualities, one can get it intellectually. Yeah, it'd be nice to be grateful, etc. But as with so many of these things, gratitude is really a practice, and it's really a practice in looking at things from a different perspective. In psychology, we call this reframing or reattribution, giving a different meaning and significance and taking a different perspective on the same experience. And with gratitude, what we're doing is we are looking at this moment, our life, and we are always, our perception is always selective. We're always consciously or unconsciously, and usually both, selecting out the attributes and features that we pay attention to and give significance to. And in gratitude, we're deliberately, consciously choosing to look for those aspects of our experience and our life and our environment which support us and in Brother David's language, bless us. And that becomes, with practice, that becomes a habit, that the mind automatically looks for and appreciates those aspects of our life and experience which are supportive, encouraging, uplifting, positive, etc. And the ideal, of course, is not that we the goal is not to be a Pollyanna. It's not to deny the very, very real suffering and extent of sorrow and pain in the world, and sometimes in our own lives. But it is to recognize that we do have a choice in what we pay attention to and what we focus on, and what we choose to attend to becomes foreground and becomes a habitual preference for what we see. So, so thank you, Brother David.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm just reminded of the point of choice. I'm trying to think of his name right here. It'll come to me in a minute, but he said that there's that choice point that, when we get triggered or stopped, or anytime that we have some event, that the last of this is Viktor Frankl is who I was thinking of, the last of our freedoms is the freedom to choose in any circumstances. So here's someone who was in Auschwitz and, survived the horrors of that era. And yet he could say, we always have a choice, and to choose gratitude, to find that place where perhaps somebody cuts us off in the road. We could actually be thankful for that and say, thank you for slowing me down. This is an opportunity for me to not allow my past, my remembered past, to bring in a trigger that then ruins my day because somebody cut me off. Instead, to be grateful for that person for slowing me down, or for recognizing the triggers I have from the past. So that's one aspect that shows up for me in what you're talking, is that space of choice, and recognize, regardless of the triggers. My friend Kyle Cease says, triggers aren't in the way of our growth or our happiness. They are the way to our growth and our happiness. So, so say a little more then about the reframing part, because I think there's much more to say about that, Roger.
Yeah, and just maybe to emphasize the point you're making there, that in multiple contemplative spiritual traditions, there is this idea, which you're giving voice to, that let's see, to use the term from from India, our karma is our dharma. That is our conditioning is our path. From Buddhism, it's manure for Bodhi, that is manure or fertilizer for awakening. We could give other examples, but the general principle is that the challenges, our reactivity is what we need to work with. And of course, I always I'm just having this little voice in the back of my head saying, yeah, these are great principles, and I don't always live them, but it's good to remember the truth of this. So I just want to emphasize what you said. As to your question about the reframing, in psychological and spiritual work, we probably all of us are familiar with multiple practices and techniques. And it's wonderful to have a toolbox of practices and techniques to use as appropriate. Most practices are pretty slow, are somewhat usually slow in their effects. They're their skills, their muscles we build up. We practice concentration, or we practice awareness and presence, or we practice love, cultivating love or compassion or generosity, any of the virtues. But these are practices, and practices are usually slow. Ideally, they're cumulative, but usually they're slow. However, there is one practice which produces immediate benefits, and that is this, what's called in psychological language, reframing or reattribution, which is looking at the same experience from a different perspective. And with reframing, you just gave an example of it. Being cut off on the road. I usually have my moment of and then ideally, not always, but sometimes there's the recognition, oh, that anger is okay. There's anger. Let me practice. In my cases, maybe a forgiveness practice, or just being aware. Just turning part of the attention to the anger and letting the anger resolve and dissolve within the awareness. So that that is a reframing from the initial belief that that's bad, he shouldn't do that, to, oh, this is an opportunity to unravel my reactivity. So it's that reframing reattribution is choosing a more skillful perspective or way of looking at something. And there's another level of that practice beyond that. That's reframing reattribution, where we choose another perspective. But there's a possibility of doing something even beyond that, which is choosing a meta perspective. And a meta perspective is a higher order viewpoint from which we're able to look at where we were looking before. It's like climbing a mountain. You climb halfway up a mountain. You can move around the mountain and get a different perspective and see a different view. So that's choosing a different perspective. But there's also the possibility of climbing further up the mountain, and then you can see both perspectives simultaneously, and you can see where you were looking from. And it's interesting that this research suggesting, as far as I can see, I've come to feel that this capacity for stepping back and taking a meta perspective is one of the core components of both psychological and spiritual growth. It's a disidentification from the beliefs and self-image and self-sense from which we were responding before. And it's a stepping back, a disidentifying from, not a disowning, but a capacity for looking at the place who we formerly thought we were in the previous moment, and our reactivity, etc. And that stepping back frees us from the limitations of the previous perspective, the previous self-image, etc. And it's looking more and more like that capacity for stepping back, for taking meta perspectives, is really one of the key features of psychological maturation and spiritual maturation. So this is actually turning out to be a very intriguing and very important practice.
Brilliant. So much in what you say. I got to comment on a couple of things as usual. So it's a practice. It's not a perfection. We need to get the difference between a practice. It's all a practice, but we're trying to get to some place that is an objective perspective that says there's a right, perfect way to be. But this is all subjective. So we're not, when these things come up and we fail, that's an opportunity to celebrate because you noticed it. You noticed it. You actually saw that. So it's not a failure. It's an opportunity to deepen your awareness. And there's really a couple levels here, just to speak to this meta perspective. There's the habitual, say, getting angry at something when someone cuts you off. There's the triggering part. There's the repetitive behavior that comes from a remembered past. And that's one level of it. And so you see that. But then there's another level where you judge that. Oh, I shouldn't be that way. I have to change. I need to stop smoking. I need to stop overeating. That is the part that is the killer of joy and happiness and contentment. And that's where the shift to witness needs to come to this, to taking the meta perspective. You understand, it's not the thing that comes up, it's the judgment about the thing that we call I, but it's not I, it's it, it's the ego. So when we can see that judgment as it, so when I'm judging myself, I don't, I can train myself to say, it's judging what I just did. So we can remove ourselves and truly step into a witness position, which the more you meditate, the more you sit in silence, the more you realize the power of getting to this meta perspective that Roger's taking. But it is a practice, and every failure is an opening, a portal for possibility, for stepping into a larger space of who you see yourself to be and how you are in the world as a presence. So yeah, let's go to the next one. I just wanted to add that little bit there.
Great. Where would you like us to go?
Didn't we have a third one? I can't remember what the third one was right now. We were talking about reframing and gratitude. Wasn't there one more that we had talked about?
Well, I think those were the main topics, but we can.
Oh, generosity. Generosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a big one. That could take the rest of our time. Sure. Well, let's see. Many things to be said. A few years ago, I did a book, Essential Spirituality: The Seven Central Practices, which I was like you and like probably a number of people we're conversing with. I was really intrigued by one of the great minds of human history. The great sages said are the most important qualities for us to develop to become full human beings, to develop our potentials, to live as fully and well as we possibly can. And it seemed that there was a remarkable degree of unanimity across cultures and traditions, that there were 7 qualities that were really important. Things like emotional maturity, releasing negative, painful, destructive emotions, anger, greed, fear, jealousy, and cultivating positive ones. The capacity for attention and focus, presence, as you mentioned before, developing wisdom. But there seemed to be agreement across traditions that the culminating practice was service or contribution, generosity of some kind or another. And intriguingly, that service generosity was viewed as both the culmination of the path. That is, we don't practice for ourselves alone, because that's just to, in some ways, fuel egocentricity. We practice for the welfare and awakening of all. And so it was a culmination of the path, but generosity service in some form or another was actually one of the 7 central practices itself. So it was both a means to and the goal of spiritual practice across multiple traditions. And I found that very intriguing, because clearly there's widespread recognition in the culture at large that a good life involves service of some kind. But here were the greatest minds of human history talking not just about contributing and service, but contribution and service as a core spiritual practice. Again, we're coming back to practice, with the idea that to the extent we practice this, the desire to contribute, generosity, altruism, grows within us, matures, and becomes a central part of our being. And maybe just one more thing to say before going back to you, that is that this service is seen very differently from the way our culture holds service. In our culture, there's often a confusion between of seeing service as sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And yet the service, generosity, altruism that spiritual traditions are pointing to held not in no way as a sacrifice, but rather as a contribution to everyone. And the true spiritual service, everyone gains, including oneself. And so it's it's the difference between superego compulsion, which is what selfless service is often seen as in our culture. You know, what passes for selfless service is a kind of superegoic compulsion as opposed to transegoic compassion, which is a very, very different experience.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm reminded of I think it's Albert Schweitzer that said, "I don't know who among you will be happy," since we're talking about happiness, but I do know that it's those of you who sought and I have found how to serve are those that will be happy. And I think that's a beautiful comment. But what does it mean to be of service in South American shamanism? There's a Quechua term called Aini, and Aini means sacred reciprocity. That means in every interaction we have, there is an exchange. It's not necessarily a change. You know, I might make a contribution here and get it over here, or I might pay something forward and it goes over here, but there's always this sense of reciprocity in everything we do. In every interaction, we are co-creating something. And as we co-create in this, what I like to call relational intimacy that takes place when we're really present with each other, there's this really opportunity to receive and give at the same time. And I think the biggest barrier to that is the cultural myth that we are living in, which is a product of a worldview, a paradigm that actually hasn't been, it's been the cultural paradigm, but it hasn't been the scientific paradigm for 100 years. And that is the linear, mechanistic, Newtonian, Cartesian view that we are separate objects in a world of objects bouncing off each other. And that view of separation is embedded in all of our institutions. It's embedded in our language, certainly. It is how we view the world, that there's an out there world, and then there's over here in here. But when you really step into this kind of generosity, this kind of opening to a sacred reciprocity, you begin to dissolve the myth of separation. And it truly is a myth. And I strongly feel it is the primary myth that's behind all suffering in the world, all war in the world, all the issues, including climate change. I'm writing a paper right now on the gift of climate change, because I'm realizing that climate change isn't an out there climate problem, it's a relationship problem. And that what we really need to do is work with our relationship with ourselves, each other, and the world as an interactive part of that. So something happening with the sound there? You okay? Okay. So this, I don't know what happened, but Kat is up on the screen.
Just keep talking.
Okay, sorry, I got distracted there. So again, going back to this kind of opportunity to find joy in every interaction we have. And when we go back to reframing, I might reframe, just to take that earlier thing, that part of a driver cuts me off and I'm about to get angry and give them the one-fingered salute. And instead of doing that, I pause and I send love out. I've sent a connection out there with that other person. And whether it's true or not, if you're operating as the space that things that contain, and especially if you do that in person, the person's not driving off, there's a release in the other person. There's an opening that's deepening, that touches into that essential joy that is who we are as a soul on this planet. And in a little while, I want to distinguish joy from happiness a little bit. But Roger, your thoughts and comments about that?
Let's see. Well, there are a variety of practices, of course, in which there's primarily for the cultivation of positive emotions such as love and compassion and joy, in which one deliberately cultivates those, and I give some examples, say the yogic practices of the so-called Brahma Viharas, the divine states of loving kindness and compassion, which are also similar practices in Buddhism, and of course in a variety of traditions for cultivation of positive emotions. And I always wonder, one part of, in many of these practices, one sets an intention: may all people be happy, or may all people be loving, etc. I always have a question in the back of my mind, is this really touching other people? And realistically, I don't know, but I know it's touching this one. So, and I have a trust born of experience, as we all have, that the more joyful and loving I feel, the more I'm likely to be a little kinder and more compassionate and with other people. So I know it works in some ways. I don't know whether it works in a field effect way or all. There's no way I could, but clearly these practices have their benefits and eventually impact large numbers of people. So yes, great appreciation for those kind of practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see, a number of things that came up as you were speaking there. I think one thing you said about intention, and I think that's such an important aspect. We underestimate the power of holding an intention. If we create an intention and we really honor ourselves as our word, who we say we are, then we have an intention that creates a context through which we then view the world. If we stay inside that intention, that context shapes it. Like, let's say you decide that you're going to buy a Volkswagen. You've been thinking about cars, and you're going to buy a Volkswagen. What happens the next day? You have that intention that you're going to buy a Volkswagen, but the next day you go out on the road, what do you see? Suddenly, everybody's driving Volkswagens, it seems like. There's so many Volkswagens out there. Well, is because there are more Volkswagens? No, it's because that's where your lens is. That's where your view is. So the context of the intention is being expressed outwardly in the world. You, again, going back to a practice, you may fail at that intention, but every failure then is an opportunity to deepen that. Which brings me to the area of what's the difference between joy and happiness. From my perspective, they're different feelings, they're different sensation. Joy to me comes from, it's our natural birthright to be joyful. It's like Joe Campbell said, can we be joyful in the face of the sorrows of the world? That's a very
beautiful quotation.
Powerful question, hey? Yeah. And that sets up a context, really. Can we be joyful in the face of the sorrows of the world? There's so much happening: genocide and climate change and greed and suffering happening. And sometimes we think that we shouldn't be joyful because there's so much horrible stuff going on. It's like, well, wait a minute, then there's one less point of joy in the world if we take that away. So You know, and you go to some of these African countries, particularly where, you know, they have nothing, they're starving, and yet it rains and they're so joyful, they're out dancing, or a baby is born and they're celebrating. They celebrate for days about that. We've lost that sense of celebration that comes from the internal sense of joy. Whereas happiness, for me, it tends to be more externally triggered by the circumstances, based on other people, other things, other places, thoughts. You know, it's othering, it's out there, rather than presencing the joy that is innate to who we are. So, yeah, I'll stop there. Roger, thoughts?
Yeah, well, you're opening a beautiful question, which is what is the range of possibilities of positive, joyful emotions and experiences? And maybe you've drawn an interesting distinction between happiness as a transient, basically a stimulus-induced emotion, as opposed to joy as a more innate, more having more depth, and perhaps even being an aspect of our being in some traditions. So maybe it'd be helpful if we looked at the spectrum of positive emotions. And I'd say even further on the scale of, I don't want to be judgmental about this, but it's going to sound like a scale of superficiality would have simple pleasure. And, you know, I love pleasure, so, and I don't want to put it down, but pleasure is a positive, is a emotionally positive feeling that arises in the face of, as a result of sensory stimulation. And we have happiness, which has a little more, can be more enduring, can be in response not just to immediate sensory experience, but to situations and people, etc. Then you mentioned joy as a deeper, something deeper, and perhaps innate to our well-being. Then we could look at experiences like, if meditators, and probably most of the people we're dialoguing with have some contemplative practice, there's, for example, the experiences that come of what's called in the Indian tradition rapture, the sense of a somatic, it's like a bodily sense of uplifting and a filling of the body, an upwelling of positive feeling as a result of a concentrated awareness. Then there are ecstatic states in which one feels lifted up out of oneself. There are ecstatic states in which one is just filled with joy, but it's in a deeply embodied joy. There is the innate joy of what in some traditions is called the joy of being, or ananda in the Indian traditions, or sukha in some of the Tibetan traditions. So that's a deep being-based sense of well-being. And then there is bliss, which is usually spoken of as an experience of an opening to the transcendent, to the divine. And in those, even within bliss, traditions draw various distinctions of various kinds of bliss that can emerge in response to states of, for example, deep concentration or a dissolution of the separate self sense. So there's this enormous spectrum from simple pleasure through to the bliss of being. And our usual cultural span is just this narrow little piece here, with no recognition that the deeper levels of well-being and joy and ecstasy and bliss, these are possibilities that are available to all of us if we do the requisite practices and cultivate them. For most of us, the only experience we have of both ecstasy and bliss is orgasm. And lives get centered around having those few seconds or minutes of experience with no appreciation that, wonderful and ecstatic and beautiful as that is, there are possibilities of even more intense ecstatic states, and the recognition that those are innate to us as part of our being.
Brilliant. I'm for hard orgasms.
I'm for all kinds of them.
I want to talk about, what you're saying. I love that, exposing the range that's there and the potentiality of all of the different, from ecstasy, bliss, I mean, just the whole range. There's something I was thinking about as you were talking, and that's faux happiness. I just came up with that term, but that happiness, that's the smile that's glued on someone's face, who is so afraid of feeling what's happening in their body and their life that they have pasted a smile on their face, or need to be happy to please others. I just came up with that term, faux happiness. So as a psychiatrist, what's your thought about, your expert opinion around that place that causes people to act like they're happy and feel they have to be happy and are chasing happiness through all kinds of external ways, but really not having the interiority, the interior experience that is a cellular, full body joy kind of experience?
Yeah, and you asked my opinion as a expert and a psychiatrist, but I think most of my response comes from simply being a human being and having done that, of course, as we all have, and having witnessed it, and also, of course, seen it in clinical cases. In the most extreme cases, we talk about smiling depression, where people can be very severely depressed, but put on as what you call faux happiness, put on a mask of happiness and okayness. And that's an extreme example, but as you were pointing to, it's a daily, very common social ritual that all of us get into at various kinds. How are you doing? Oh, fine, thanks, great. You? So it's part of the social ritual, the social glue, and it has its place. Most interactions are not going to be, okay, how you're really feeling. Let's sit down and talk for 10 minutes about your real experience. Most interactions are quick, superficial, and ritualized. That's fine. They have their place. It greases the machinery and moves social life. The deeper concern is when people feel, as you were pointing to, that a social and obligation to put on a false persona, or an internally driven obligation to put on that kind of false persona, and when there's either an inability or an unwillingness to, and here there's a spectrum of possibilities, acknowledge pain, or to even experience pain. And this is a condition which we call dyslexithymia, that is the incapacity for experiencing one's emotions. And that is both produces pain and is the result of pain, and at its worst produces pathology, because then people either consciously or unconsciously, and usually both, cut themselves off from their deeper experience. And there are a couple of really important principles to know about how the mind works. One is, what you're unwilling to experience sticks around until you are willing to experience it. And second, what you're unwilling to experience runs your life. So if you're unwilling to experience your sadness, your life will be spent in repressing, suppressing, and thereby projecting, etc., that sadness. And your life will be spent in avoiding the recognition of that experience and putting yourself in situations which remind you of it. So you're pointing, Michael, to a very, very important psychological principles and, at their worst, some tragic clinical cases.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Roger. Yeah, I want to pick up on those last two things you said, particularly. Um, so we're talking about the faux happiness as a way to avoid feeling those feelings that are undigested, that are unexperienced, that come from our past, and we've dissociated, we want to keep them suppressed and kept down. Unfortunately, they will continue to come up until we deal with them. That's the nature of it. And that's really a good thing, because the body, like the body, the emotional nervous system wants to heal. Everything in the body wants to heal. So by keeping it suppressed, there's no possibility of healing that. So the first part you're saying, I just want to go through it again so people really hear it. And secondly, in order to keep it suppressed and down, that shapes our every action in our life. That energy takes enormous energy to keep these things suppressed and down. And it's amazing doing a soul retrieval or being with somebody that has a release, and the amount of effervescent joy that comes when people let go of a fear. We were just talking with somebody this morning that was on Adderall and doing a job that she had a great aptitude for, working on a computer all the day, but it was totally, she was taking the Adderall so she could stay focused on doing something she didn't like, when what she really wanted to do was talk and work with and coach people around addiction, which she had changed an addiction of eating, and she had coached it, and then her mother said, "Oh, that's such a waste of time. You need to get busy and make money." So to please her mother, she quit doing what she loved, and she was doing this other job. And in order to do it, was taking Adderall to keep herself focused on this one thing and push out everything else that wanted to arise to be healed. So this is a pretty complex situation there. And it points to something that I know there are cases in, many cases in psychiatry where it's appropriate for someone to get back on their feet to take certain drugs, and maybe they may have to do that, and I would never say not to do that. But how much the I'll take a pill and it'll fix it syndrome has entered into the equation in the last few decades, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the great issues in mental health treatment these days. Medicine and mental health are run by insurance companies and lawyers largely these days, and the insurers want to pay for the least amount of treatment in the shortest amount of time, which usually means drugs. So there's enormous pressure, tragically, really tragically, for everyone, from patients and therapists and physicians, to prescribe rather than to describe and investigate and explore and unearth and release. So you're pointing to one of the great tragedies of our time, the over-medicalization and over-prescribing for psychological and in some cases even spiritual ills, which would be much better addressed by a deep exploration with a counselor, a therapist, a psychiatrist, etc. Let me ask you a question, Michael. I saw a couple of things pop up on the screen, including something from Audrey asking the best way of getting in touch with these emotions. Are you going to come back to those, or should we address them as they come up?
I'm glad you brought that up, Roger, because I've just been feeling, normally I would say, let's do some kind of journey or guided meditation. But I think I'd like to jump right in with exactly what I'm same place. I was just thinking the same thing. skip, and maybe if we do a guided journey, have it at the end and really get into some interactive work with Audrey and other people that might want to do that, because I think the richness comes from being on the field, not talking about the game.
Yeah, and Audrey's had a couple of things, including a great question. So by all means, you lead the way.
Okay, Audrey, would you be willing to come on the screen or interact with us a little bit? Because I love what you're saying, and can we call you up and have a dialogue with you?
Hi, I'm here. I just need to turn my heat down.
Hi, okay.
Because I can't hear anything.
Okay, that wasn't the metaphoric heat, eh?
Well, you know, if I'm going to go with menopause, since we're getting personal here, no.
I meant the heat of being.
I know, I got you. No, you know, at this rate, I don't care so much anymore. This is helping me overcome my public speaking phobia.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, first of all, for the courage to step in, be the first one. And so let's look, what's going on, like the barriers that you're experiencing to experience joy and happiness in your life. What is the story that's going on there for you?
Geez, if that were clear, boy, I'd probably have a better stab at this whole thing. I'll do my best to give you a 1-minute version of nutshell. I was a teacher for 20 years. I worked mostly abroad, so I haven't lived in this country for a while.
This
I had
country
my
being the U.S.?
Sorry, yes, being the U.S. I grew up in Southern Oregon. I have very supportive parents. About 5 years ago, I got the proverbial 2x4 slap bang upside the head by the universe saying, look, man, you're not doing what you want to do. I was having a lot of fun, but I fell into a deep depression. I planned a suicide. I just didn't give a shit. I felt like I had lived a great life. I felt that I had, I just felt like I was taking up space. So I'm going to fast forward to when I was in the States. I spent a couple of months wondering how much was menopause and hormonal and stuff like that. And I did a lot of crying. My brother was going on a trip to Hawaii where I met this guy, a friend of his, who gave me a book. The power, the will to heal, something it's about healing oneself without psychotherapy or talk therapy. And there was a section on EMDR. Mm-hmm. And so when I came back to the States, or to Oregon, I found a doctor who practiced EMDR, and that was the first time I ever interviewed a doctor. I wanted to know where this guy was in his practice, because the way that I put it is that if I had children, I would not want my child in my classroom with me with the feelings that I had, which is part of the reason I left teaching. And so in the last 4.5 years, I have spent, and partly because the health system here was so confusing to me and I just couldn't deal with it, I didn't go that route. So I spent 8 months paying out of pocket to see this guy once and twice a week for EMDR. Whole other story. I read, joined, dove into, you name it, free things, paid for things. I tried hypnotherapy. I read countless books. I found some great material, wonderful things. I started picking myself back up. I became a life coach and wanting to help people move out of crappy jobs and find something that they love and help them understand some of the things that I was learning that I absolutely love. And I could talk to you guys for hours about all of this. Though that said, I've been working my butt off, and I have been living off of savings and invested income. And I really want to work. I really want to generate income to Reframe. I've been working very hard to put things together. So in July, something happened that I did my best not to create a new story around. And thank you for listening, because I know this is past a minute version of my nutshell. So what I've come to this place, and mind you, in between here, I've journaled, I've sat in meditation with myself, with guided meditation, with, I say music, but chanting or other things. I dove head into Joe Dispenza's work, love his work. I've meditated with him. I know that I need to change things up some, but I've always kept some sort of quieting practice, as well as writing, gratitude journal, a brag book for myself. So this thing that happened in July, I was kind of reflecting on this weekend. And I've never been in business and done anything that I'm doing now. So I feel like I've made huge efforts to work through the crap that, like I said, dragging Harry around. And yet what has come back over the last 6 weeks or so, and I say the last couple of months, has been this feeling that I wake up with. I've even worked with energy medicine and worked with some tapping. And, I've wondered, have I not given certain things a long enough opportunity to work? Is this not the right modality? So in all of these things in the last couple of months, the hardest thing for me to digest has been this feeling that's come up. So I'll wake up and I'll go to the loo, or, it's a real fine line between knowing I can fall back asleep or when I'm in beta all over again. And to get out of bed and do some breathing and to calm down, I bought a heart math monitor so I could calm myself as well. I started to get scared again because the feelings of suicide and thinking like as a solution started coming up again. And I know that's not a solution. I know that's not what I really want to do. I know that I have things to offer people and experiences, and I don't believe that there's any one healing modality. I believe it takes a village. I believe that there's more than one thing. And I've experienced so many things in so many different places that I can feel the intensity of being in this country. And I'm really grateful, to be honest with you, to be an American, as well as to have had the ability to be out of it. So I don't know what to do aside from an amygdala removal that I have asked about, and I thank God for my sense of humor.
I do too. Oh, you froze. Are you there?
Connection to spirituality. So when I left the Solomon Islands, this last place that I was, I felt utterly disconnected to everything, especially myself. And I feel like I've gained greater connection to myself and the spirit in the last couple of years, especially through all of the practices that I've learned. I now, though, again, feel I'm all over the map, and I don't know what I've lost in the biggest way, I think, is the trust and belief in myself.
Yeah. And Audrey, you've obviously tried a number of things. What I didn't hear, and what I'm wondering is, who do you have do you have a support system?
I have a kind of support system, and that's been something that I know has affected me. So in a sense, no. Both of my parents are super understanding and supportive in whatever it is I do. And that said, they're my parents. And I know they just want me to be happy, so that they don't really get all of this. And it may sound kind of strange, but through this marketing program that I dove into a year ago, I've connected with some amazingly wonderful heart-centered people. So I at least have Zoom and Skype with them on occasion.
Okay.
But no one else.
What I'm hearing is that you've been through an awful lot. You've done an enormous amount of work and healing and been through a lot of processes for yourself, and you're really trying to make a new business fly, and you're feeling overwhelmed. And so, obviously this would be better dealt with over time and with a therapist and counselor. So, we have limitations here in the time and depth we can go, and we clearly need more than that. So the first question that comes up to me is, who are the people you can turn to for both personal and professional and perhaps spiritual help? And can you are there people you can reach out to and get that in some way? Online, in person, ideally?
In person, nobody. I mean, I can talk to both of my parents to a point, but that doesn't feel good because I feel like it feels, I don't want to add stress. Even if I am making that up, I can imagine what being a parent, hearing your child speak like this must feel like.
Yeah, and I appreciate your care and concern and deep compassion for them. And I can't but think that your parents would much prefer to hear of your pain than to find out later what you've been through and that they hadn't been there and you hadn't felt able to talk to them. So it seems like your parents may be a place to start, but not a place to end.
Well, I do speak with them, and I have, and they're very patient with me. I don't share every last little thing, but I have talked about the suicide, and I also realized or recognized just how much in this last month I've reached a point of freaking out about money, which was never an issue with me. I've always felt fine. It's not like I've always had loads of money, and it's just I'm able-bodied. I've had work, and this transition left me feeling.
There are lots of factors coming in here, and you're clearly feeling overwhelmed, and it's understandable. And again, what we can work with here is so limited in terms of what seems many factors that are impinging on you and overloading you. And again, I want to just I guess I would primarily want to encourage you to really look to what are the personal, the professional, family places that you can turn, not to begin getting some support and having some people to talk with in depth. You need the opportunity you need multiple kinds of support.
I do, and I don't, my intention has been not to pitch a tent in any one of these places. So I've got a lot of tools that I do use. Part of the reason I have not chosen to continue talking in what I told, which is kind of funny to see Dan S. here in the chat, because the doctor that I went to see was Dan S. And he was great, and we got along well. And like I said, I stayed with him for 6 to 8 months. But at one point I said, you know what? I'm done. Rehashing, talking about this over and over and over was not helping me at all.
Yeah.
And
so something new is needed, but it feels like you need support. And to your credit, you interviewed your doc, and it's really very appropriate for you to meet some counselors and therapists.
Let me step in a second here, Audrey, and
thanks.
I just want to, I totally am in agreement with everything that's just been said, and I'm not a therapist, so I can be a little, maybe a little more out there about some things because I can't get sued. But I want to zero in on one thing you said and just work with one thing, Audrey. You said, I need to change things.
I want to change things.
You said, I need to change things. That's what you said.
Yeah.
That's the issue that I see is the heart of the suffering. Who says you need to change things? Who says that?
I say that because I don't like feeling this way.
Right, but that's your ego. That's your identity. That's your story is saying that. It's saying that. Remember when I was talking before about it? Well, that's it. It says you need to change something. And then you have a lot of story around
Yeah.
what you think you need to change.
Yeah.
Now, what does that story do? It keeps you stuck in the same place because there's something that isn't being expressed at a soul level. So I need to change something is not you speaking. It's actually your identity. Like I said, there's the different levels. So there's the level that's like, oh, I'm scared and I feel like I'm going to commit suicide. And that's not a problem. I've had those thoughts. Everybody has thoughts like that. That's not a problem. The problem is I need to change.
Mm.
So the more you say that, the more you continue to suppress those things that really just want to come up and be healed and loved.
So I got a question for you in that regard, because I had reached a point when I was searching all over the place, listening to these things, signing up, going workshops, and then things kind of came to a little more calm. And I decided I've got a ton of stuff to support me with this listening, and I was connecting with other people, like I was saying, in this business. And in regard to what Roger had said about talking to somebody, what I would love would be somebody, either a psychologist or a person like you, or a person to help me uncover that, connect to, well, I mean, I don't, like, I'm not sure what that really means or looks like, I guess, because I don't.
Look at everything you just said, right? Where are you looking for the answers?
Well, I had been looking out there, and in learning,
agency, you give away your own agency when you continue. That's not to say that you can't get a lot. I'm just giving you something.
Yeah.
Roger,
so can I ask you then, in the beginnings of this, as I was accumulating processes and methods, tools to help me work through this, have I been negating, like, all of the mornings and moments during my days when I sit and connect with myself and breathe and do some mindful meditations throughout my day? I just feel like I'm on this roller coaster. I don't want to keep looking on the outside. I'm intellectually very aware of the fact that I need to go inside, and I've been doing what I can the way that I know how, with journaling, with meditating. And when the head stuff starts going too much, I do my best to ask it what it wants, or I'll turn to breathing, or I'll look at my candle flame, or I'll journal, or I'll meditate with Dr. Joe or somebody else. And I do these things.
All great things to do. And there's a little Audrey there that is dying for love, and the only person that can give it to little Audrey is you. You're the only person that ultimately can. You have lots of tools already. You could spend another 50 years getting tool, but that tear that wants to come out right now is what wants to happen. Audrey needs to put her arms around little Audrey and honor whatever is coming up and love it and love that. Can you love that searching that you're on? You're on a seeking, you're here, you're on this path of finding wholeness, but it's all out here. And then there's this little girl inside you that says, can you see me? What, I just want to be seen. I don't want to hurt anybody. I just want to be seen. There's someone there, that in the past you decided, oh, I'm going to fix something, but nothing's broken. There's nothing broken. That's a story. That's the it. The it is that story. You're not the story. You're the space that the story is in. So if you expand your physical, emotional, and mental capacity through sitting and loving whatever arises. Oh, I'm thinking of committing suicide, and I love that. What if you said that? You're
Not,
human, you're tender, you're connected. When you say that, you're connected to millions of people. Do you know how many millions of people think in their horrible circumstances that they've created in their life or that they were thrown into that say, oh, maybe I should just commit suicide?
yeah.
Well, when you love that part of yourself, you love it for the whole. You're not separate. The more you can love that part of yourself and honor it. So what are other feelings you're trying to push away? What's something you're trying to push away, or situations you're trying to push away? Say one of the situations. I wish I had more money. What?
Uh,
I don't have enough money.
I would love no, I don't feel that. I would love to be clear.
So what you're saying in saying that is I'm not clear, right?
I'm not clear on what I would like to do in this world anymore.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now say this, I'm not clear of
I'm not.
well, wait a second.
Uh,
Not clear of what I want to do in this world anymore, and I love that.
I'm not
Look at the
clear of
difference
what
happening.
I want to do
Thinking
in
about
this
it.
world, and I love that.
Now feel that in your body. What just happened?
Something moved from here to my throat, and I feel like throwing up.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. And you might. And if I throw up, what can you say? I'm gonna throw up and
I'll be right back.
no, throw up right here. It's okay. Cover the camera. It's all right. It's fine. I feel like I'm gonna throw up, and I love that. See what happens to little inner Audrey when you actually can embrace those things that come up. What only thing that's missing is you, the space that's you, not the story that's you, the space that's you. The only thing that's missing is you loving you. The little you that got hurt and keeps having that come up again and again. And I know Joe Dispenza and many other people who you've studied with would say the same thing. I'm just kind of more trying to look, when you say, I have fear coming up, and I love that, it makes room for the fear to be there. You don't have to go out searching for something. You can just be, the fear wants to be, all these things that come up for us, they want to be seen. They want to be embraced. They want to be loved. It's all stuff, stories.
No, it just occurred to me that listening to you that I've compartmentalized certain things, like some of the things I've done in life, people have said, oh, you're so brave, which I also dismissed because it wasn't scary to me, like moving abroad or something. And yeah, it was just an interesting, I hadn't thought about it.
You love that part of yourself that wasn't scared and took on risks. See,
Yes.
that's the other side. It's not just the negative stuff that comes up. It's like, the beautiful things that you've done, that you've survived, that you've gotten through in your life,
I think I just completely dismissed myself.
Yeah, you used to.
Yes, up until now.
Okay, can you say, I used to dismiss myself?
I used to dismiss myself, and I love that.
Yeah, because that's what got you here in this conversation, which could, if you really take this in, change your entire life.
Yeah.
It's really loving what there is that wants to be. Your body and your emotions and your mind all are programmed to heal. It's just the it. You are not the it. You're not the story. You're the space that the story happens in. And as you meditate, those places where you're a witness of the story. You're not the story. You're the witness of the story. You're not it. You're the witness to it. So if you can love it, then it won't have anything to push against. When you try to change something, you're affirming that it exists in the present moment. Everything we try to change reinforces what we're trying to change. I mean, why would you change it if you're looking out at some future, but you're not here? But if you're in the present, anything you're trying to change is simply reinforcing the thing and giving more mass to the story, to it. Whereas if you stand back and just love it, and love the little girl that formulated that story, that was trying to please mom or dad, that's still trying to please mom or dad by not being a wreck, fall apart. Enjoy it. Really. Can you joyfully fall apart? And allow yourself to fall apart. And then there's a space of all possibility. This space of really expanding yourself as a teacher, and really just because the space that you become allows other people to really connect deeply with you.
I felt like I had done that and had come back full circle to the same place. So this past month or so, when I was going through my, oh shit, my God, why am I in the same place? Well, I'm not in the same place. I've spiraled up. Maybe I didn't
That's it
follow.
trying to convince you that you're okay. You said, I had done this. No.
Yeah.
All there is
still
right
is
here, right now, and the ability to love whatever's arising and to be with it. Including if you say, I don't love this, and I love that I don't love this. Can you just give space for it to express itself? Because it isn't you. That's not your soul. That's not your essence.
Right.
That's your story. So love it. But it's not you.
Right.
Can you sit with that and feel
the
difference of that in your body? You got to go to the body. You got to feel it in your body, Audrey.
Right.
You got to feel that. Notice just when you added, and I love that, how your whole body opened up, your face opened up, you turned into your more essential self by just loving it, not trying to fix it. Nothing's broken. Look at that smile. So beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your authentic sharing and your vulnerability. It's just such a gift for everybody here and on the call. And
thank you.
Not on the call. It's just such a gift. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I thank you. I thank all of you very much for holding the space, for having this. And because I feel that in all these different modalities have all throughout this whole process has been part of the lifting up, the humor.
You're a miracle. Yeah, your humor is wonderful.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. But you're a miracle. So just, don't try to hold on to this. Don't try to do anything with it. Just remember when something comes up, and I love that.
And I love that.
And I love that.
And I love that. That's going in front of my face.
Good.
Very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Audrey.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Can't find where to mute myself there.
Oh, Marielle will. Don't worry about it. But don't mute yourself in life.
Now, Dan, I wonder, you shared with us the lyrics to the song that you wrote, and I wondered if you would be up to either speaking or singing it into the group. Would you speak?
Or
just speak it. It's just that they're beautiful, and I think it'd be wonderful.
Hi, Dan.
To share it.
Hi. Well, I was just actually thinking about, I mentioned that I wrote that song in rehab, and I was just thinking about relapse and recovery and regret, and loving the fact that I relapsed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's difficult, you know.
Yeah.
But sure, I'll give it a shot. I'm probably not gonna go get my guitar now because it's probably out of tune. But anyway, you can dwell. The song is called Choices, and it just really resonated with what the beginning of this conversation. And anyway, I was really dealing with a lot of regret in rehab, and when I relapsed, I was as well. And I'm just getting back to the point where I can actually play this song for myself. So it's called Choices. You can dwell on all you've lost, mistakes you've made, and what they've cost. Wallow in misery at all you lack. Let regret be a monkey on your back. Or live each day in gratitude for all you have and know the truth, that every moment offers a space to live in honesty and grace. It's not so easy to feel the pain, what twisted the tracks, derailed the train. You've got to move through it, not around. That's where the healing can be found. Do the work and open your heart. Lift a friend up, that's a start. Embrace the angel or feed the demon. The choice is yours, but one is leaving.
Wow, that is brilliant. I love
All
that.
right.
Wow, do you have a recording of that?
Yeah, I do.
Can you send me a copy?
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, regret. It's such a big thing, Roger. I think that's not a bad thing to talk about. It's, for me, rehashing a story that our ego has told us that comes from the past. And you rehash it. And when you rehash it, you re-feel it and re-experience it. And you put yourself right back into the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there are very important distinctions between an appropriate use of looking at the past for learning and growth, as opposed to, and regret can have its place. In fact, in Buddhist psychology, regret can be one of the healthy mental qualities, but we usually confuse it with guilt, and guilt is regret plus self-attack, and the self-attack is just destructive. So regret, yeah, it can be useful. I made mistakes. It's a pity. Okay, what can I learn from that? But guilt tends to be a pretty destructive emotion.
You know, I worked with a guy. I'm here in Medford, Oregon, actually, and I sent Audrey a link to or the name of someone who my friend who's hosting me gifted me a session with him, and we did some work around regret. And the thing is, you know, I have all these. I told him everything triggers regret, just about everything that happens in my life. And it's like, I gave him for instance, like there was a couple sitting in the office waiting for their therapist and to come down and get them. And I went back to my opportunities that I had with my wife to go to couples therapy. And now we're separated for about a year. And, you know, he offered me to sit with the sadness of these experiences. And what happens is I go to regret, and then I'm like, and because I effed up, and that's the guilt there, you know. And so it's like every stimuli and experience, you know, practically I started thinking maybe I should write them down just to see how absurd they are. I mean, just how frequent they are. And
Great. That's a great idea to journal those things and really see what's underneath them. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, so just not to punctuate, you know, he offered me don't even go to regret. And maybe that's because that triggers, and because I screwed up, which was the guilt, you know, which and to just sit with the sadness, you know. My daughter and I are not estranged, but she's really ticked off at me because I relapsed, and you know, and that's sad, full stop, you know.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah, it is sad. And what can, you know, what, not easier said than done, but what can you learn from that? And be wary of the self-attack.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm learning a lot here. I appreciate this.
Thanks, Dan and Audrey.
Thank you.
We're getting to the end here. Yeah, there's a lot of sadness in the world and in our lives. And I just want to really recommend, can you be with the sadness and love it and allow it? Because it really needs to be expressed. Actually, there's a lot of grief in the world. And if we were really connected with each other in the world, we'd probably spend some time every day crying and feeling it. And that connects us with the world. So the ability, it's not wallowing in grief or sadness. It's actually allowing ourselves to feel it in our body. You know, my work has always been about going back to the body, being embodied. And I just want to thank all of you on the call this morning. It's just delightful, and particularly Dan and Audrey for taking the risk of being on the camera live. But also to Roger, my friend, Roger Walsh, you are just amazing. I love dialoguing with you. I'm looking forward to seeing you next month and the Bay Area. And just, it's always fun to be on these with you. And I hope everyone got some value for themselves. If anyone is triggered about anything, because sometimes I can be kind of intrusive, I realize that. Like I said, I'm not a therapist, so don't try to sue me. But I'm coming, just trying to meet you heart to heart in a way that we recognize our deep interconnection, interbeing with each other. And so, and thank you, Marielle, also for supporting all of this and always being here to hold people. It's just an amazing talent that you have. So thank you. And
thank you very much for the opportunity of being with you and with everyone. And thank you, Audrey and Dan, and for your contributions, and for everyone else too. The opportunity of dialoguing and discussing, central life issues like this is a gift. So very much appreciate the chance to be with you all.
May you all be joyful in the face of the sorrows of the world. Thank you, Joseph Campbell, and thank you all, and bye for now.
Thank you.